Joining us now for another coaching conversation, head coach of the Monmouth Roseville Titans, Jeremy Adolphson. Coach, you and I go way back. We've known each other for quite a while. It's good. I can't believe I've never had you on the show before. So welcome into View from the West.
Thanks. I appreciate the offer, and a huge fan. I've been listening since you guys got started, and yeah, it's definitely something I look forward to on those early Tuesday or Wednesday mornings. They pop out each week, and instant reacts at night, especially after a win. It's nice to hear who else had positive nights. So really appreciate all the work you guys do.
Yeah, thank you. No, I appreciate it. Hey, speaking of, you and I going way back, I saw that we had one repost of this on X overnight, and it was your old assistant coach, Anthony Frakes. So
oh, perfect.
He's out there. He's still promoting it. He's at Moline, right? He's doing defensive work at Moline.
Yes, I actually just talked to him this past Saturday evening. My youngest stepdaughter graduated from United, and he was at the graduation party. So we were talking a little football, and yeah, we're gonna match up with Moline late in the summer for some camp work there against them football wise. So looking forward to that. But yeah, he worked with me at Rockridge there for 4 years and been a great friend ever since then. He's bounced around. I moved to Monmouth, obviously, and yeah, he's definitely one of our bigger supporters for sure from outside the area.
Yeah. Well, I say, you and I go way back, and I always think it's funny. I look back at like when I first moved to the area, through working in TV, and you meet a lot of coaches and you talk to them for 5 minutes doing an interview, and it's before a game, before practice, or whatever it is, and you get a lot of cliches, right? You get a lot of coaching sound bites.
Sure.
What I always appreciated about you was, we met and kind of got to know each other off the field a little bit. So right. I don't know. I always felt like that was the first time I was kind of getting some behind the scenes, and you'd hear some, you'd hear some stories and you'd hear some things. And I always just kind of appreciated like, oh man, it's cool to hear like kind of what goes on. I felt like I was hearing some conversations that, go on between coaches or go on between
sure.
coach and player. And you get a little more insight into a program than just, we're trying hard every day and whatever. So I always kind of appreciated that. But anyway, let's go. We've known each other a while, but let's go way back. Talk about your days as an Aledo Green Dragon. So
sure.
your playing days. And I guess the question I would start with is, what did you see? What did you learn as a player that you kind of still carry with you? Whether it was from coaches you had back then or just kind of the general mentality. What have you taken with you as a player that you now still use as a coach?
There's a bunch. I was a freshman at Aledo in 1991. So 91 to 94 were my years of high school football. Bill McCarty was our head coach. Who I still communicate with to this day, was a fantastic coach, very demanding, very tough, very fair, rewarded people who worked really hard. We had a great coaching staff at the time. Bill Braden was our defensive coordinator. Mike Schmitz was a JV coach who became like the varsity offensive line guy during the playoffs. Still really close with him to this day. He lives here in Monmouth. And then we had Mark Archer and Larry Grind as well, our other JV coach that had helped out. It just seemed like a really good group of guys. The thing I guess that drew me to football was I wasn't a great athlete growing up, and probably not the toughest kid in the world, and kind of got into lifting weights and got into working hard. And they just they promoted the kids who did that and rewarded the kids who did that, and it just made you want to do more of it. I don't remember ever it being explicit that you wanted to be. I wanted to be a big football star or anything like that. It just like I can lift weights, I can work hard, I can do these things. And they always rewarded that and really promoted those things. And then it kind of, what it did, it built your confidence, and you kind of built yourself up into something that was maybe more than what you were. And I would say about my sophomore year of high school, I decided this is what I want to do. I want to be a football coach. I want to be a teacher. That's what these guys do. I enjoyed their classes. And so I think the big thing of just taking pride in your work, it wasn't just working hard. They had a way of making you feel like, hey, you're doing things that other kids in this school won't do. You're doing things that other teams won't do, and they kind of built you up that way. And I tried to really take that with me when I started coaching, probably to the extreme, when maybe not always positive for some of the kids that we had, but just trying to get them to understand that like it's okay to feel really good about yourself. It's okay to have self-confidence, what other people may call cocky, but if you feel like I'm putting in this work, I'm doing things other people won't do. I think that's not necessarily a bad thing in most cases. So I really take that along with me. I also think our coaches were really good at preparing us for what other teams did. But also I believe our coaches were big on, if something's working, we're just going to keep going. We don't need to be creative for the sake of being creative. I still remember my senior year, we had a drive where we ran one kid, Matt O'Brien, Michael's older brother. Yep. I think we ran him like 12 plays in a row, and they finally stopped it once, and then we ran it the 13th time, and he still scored. Like, it was just, our coaches, I think, believe if it's working, let's just keep hammering away. And that's something I've taken with me, that, it seems very simplistic, but sometimes creativity can cause more problems than solutions.
Yeah. Well, I've seen and watched closely the Marquette Tom Yupst offense, so I know very well what you mean about the playbook doesn't always have to be 500 pages long. It can be pretty concise, and if it works, you keep doing it. He built a pretty impressive resume off of doing that. So
absolutely.
So when I was working at Channel 6, I worked with a friend of the podcast, Nick Bull. He was on the episode recently. When he was there, we joked about how, like, that was where I got my, like, Aledo history lesson, right? Like, Bully was there every morning to watch an old tape that Dan Pearson had shot, and we'd watch this game. He'd give me the backstory. He'd tell me about what I was watching. So I really felt like I got a football education there where we were working the morning show. So we had two, you remember, I mean, you might have copies of it somewhere. Bully compiled every clip of footage that Dan or anybody at Channel 6 had ever shot about Aledo, going back to early mid-'80s all the way through, basically when Aledo became Mercer County. So anyway, what games are on that DVD, I'm sure whether you've seen it or not, that you would have been a part of that stand out to you as like, man, that was an all-timer. I'll never forget that moment.
Yeah, I actually remember, I think, when he called that DVD, but I won't say that. But anyway, no, there were some great ones on there. So my sophomore year, I was just on the team that went to the semifinals. I came in and mop-up time, got to play a little bit in some playoff games even that we got ahead of. My junior year, we had a really good team. We ended up 12-1, lost in the semifinals. But there were some big-time games there. The Byron game is the one that always stands out to me. My junior year, and this was back when you played 2 playoff games the first week. So we beat Morrison on the Wednesday, like 14-0. And Byron, we were number 5 in the state in 2A. Byron was number 1. They won their first round game like 58-14. They played like Warren or something, not the Warren here, Monmouth, but the other one up north, and just blasted them. So they come to Byron on Saturday. So we play a game Wednesday night.
Yeah.
Practice the day after, practice the day before, play a game on Saturday. It's the number 1 team in the state. And this is back before they didn't seed anything. It was just they put teams together. And so they came to Aledo that day, and I'll never forget it. Like, it was the coolest, as a player, the coolest game I was ever a part of. High school, college, doesn't matter. There were snow flurries in the air, and we ended up winning that game, came from behind, had a fourth quarter drive to take a lead. Byron came back and actually had a field goal attempt to tie it and missed it at the end. And it was just complete pandemonium on the field afterwards. But I specifically remember the Channel 6 highlights from that. And it was just, it was just an amazing game. And the next week went to Stillman Valley, beat them in the quarterfinals. We ended up winning by like 3 touchdowns. And I remember thinking at the end, like, it seemed kind of anticlimactic because it was like, we got away from them. The fourth quarter, we got away. But even though it was like 2 interceptions returned for touchdowns in the fourth, like, these great things are happening. But it seemed not boring, but like not nearly as exciting as the week before. So that was big on there. And then, of course, the next week we lost to Coal City in a game that we trailed the entire way, took the lead for, I think, 30 seconds, and then they took it right back from us at the end of the game to get us before they won the state title. So that run for sure, I know was on there, and they were at a bunch of our games. We had a Saturday afternoon game at Macomb that my junior year because the officials didn't have officials on Friday night. Like, we got there, there's no officials. So we didn't play. The next day we play, and it was a monsoon. And there were some really cool highlights in there of that game because it was just a muddy mess. And I remember Channel 6 being there. Brad Hoffman, our running back, I think ran for like 250 yards. Like, they couldn't tackle him. And I think actually caught a ball is why I remember being on the highlight zone on that night. So, but yeah, it was that run there for sure would have been littered throughout that. And then Nick was actually a freshman when I was a senior. So Nick was on the list of kids. There was a group of kids there, 3 to 5. And then probably 3 to 5 us juniors and seniors that would pick those kids up in the morning to take them to weightlifting in the winter and the spring. We all worked out before school then. There was nothing during the school day because all of us were basketball, wrestling, track, baseball. And those are some great times. And so Nick would definitely be one of the best Aledo historians as far as the player perspective. There's other people in town who definitely would probably have a little more because they go back further. But yeah, I do remember that DVD. It was very cool.
Yeah, it was, like I said, it was my education. So sidetrack. Can you imagine now as a head coach trying to play a game on a Wednesday and then prepare in 2 days for another playoff game? Like the most important games of your season, and you have 2 days to prepare for it.
I still go back and try to remember. Like I remember getting together in Coach Breeden's classroom where we watched film, and I remember, we're introducing Byron. And like I said, Coach Schmitz, who was our JV head coach, kind of became the offensive line guru because Coach Breeden, our defensive coordinator, did that during the regular season. So they divided up the job. So I don't think they worked on Thursday and Friday. I'm pretty sure our coaches were allowed substitutes because they had to drive and get the film after that game on Wednesday, right? Bring it back, break it down, have a practice. So I don't think they worked either day, honestly. And I think the school district, which they needed to. I mean, they were probably working really, really hard, but just not in the classroom there.
Yeah.
So basically, you're doing your day after the game, which we did nothing at Aledo. Like we didn't do Saturdays or Sundays ever. So day after the game, installed it. We went on the field that day for a little bit, and then Friday, I remember vividly being on the field. They had a kid, Glenn Padgett, was their quarterback, linebacker, punter. Ended up being a player at Western Illinois. Was a stud, and like. One of my good buddies, Chris Meskin, who ended up being an All-American Augustana, was a junior, and his job was to go block that kid on every play. Like they pretty much set the scheme. So our best kid was going to go after their best kid and give us a shot at getting this guy blocked. And I vividly remember them getting that put in on Thursday, practiced on Friday, and then we're rolling again on Saturday. Yeah, it's insane to think about trying to do that. You know, we've had a few 3-day weeks because of a Thursday game or something like that, but. Yeah, I mean, literally number 1 versus number 5. And it was an epic, I mean, it was a fantastic football game. So maybe in retrospect, maybe practice just gets in the way of high execution because both teams played, I thought, an amazing game. I mean, you kind of romanticize it going back 32 years now, 31 years. But yeah, it's crazy to think that we did that.
Yeah. So, the coaching tree starting in Aledo doesn't just end with you. You also played football in Aledo with head coach of the Fulton Steamers, Pat Lower. So tell me about, your relationship in high school. And then it's probably pretty cool for you to kind of, keep tabs with, both of your careers over the years.
Absolutely. Yeah. Pat and I go way back. I mean, kindergarten, essentially T-ball. And then we were really good friends growing up. His sister actually babysat me and my sisters. And so more days than not, Pat would just come over and we'd go out and play, whether it was tennis or wiffle ball or tennis, basketball. We did everything. Essentially, she was there to babysit my sisters, and we just played all day long. And so we were, grew up playing football, basketball, baseball together. He was a year older than me. Fantastic player. To go back to tie in the Byron story, I vividly remember it was 4th and 4. We had the ball when we were down there on that last drive, and he came into the huddle very emotionally pleading, like, we got to get this. We have to get this. I'll never forget that. And sure enough, we got it. We threw a little pass in the flat. I think actually he's the one who caught it, extended the drive, and we ended up winning it. And just awesome relationship growing up. We played Legion baseball together, varsity baseball, basketball, football, did it all. And then kept in close contact throughout college because we were good friends, but also on the same track, and as it turned out, my first year coaching was at Northwestern La Harpe down in Sciotos at Northwestern High School, part of that co-op. He got the job at Fulton, so we started coaching at the same time. And that year, they actually beat Northwestern La Harpe at Northwestern La Harpe in the quarterfinals in a playoff game that year. And what I remember about really being cool that day was Jim Taylor interviewed Pat Lower and myself separately on Sportsline, which I'd been on, I'd been interviewed by Jim as a high school athlete a few times, but to me, it was like, I've arrived as a coach. I'm on Sportsline, in the morning there before the game. And they got the best of us there. And then I moved on to Alwood, and he would bring his team to our 7-on-7. Once at Rock Ridge, we got together and did things. And we coached against each other as head coaches in the track the first couple of years MR got in here. So he's a great friend and awesome coach, and just when we get together, we can still go back to those second grade, backyard stories, as well as, the football stories that we played and coaching against each other.
That's amazing. That's so cool. So by all accounts, Pat Lower, great guy, really good guy. Now, for any of our listeners, Toby Vallas had a different story that he tells. So Aledo played Knoxville in the playoffs, correct?
Regular season.
Regular season. Okay.
My junior year, Patrick's senior year, yes.
Okay.
93.
And Toby Vallas was a pretty good athlete, in his day. And his Knoxville team, unfortunately, depending on which way you look at it, they took a tough one that day. So they're down, they're losing near the end of the game. His story goes that he gets tackled. Patrick Lower gets up, grabs his shoe, throws it onto the sideline. So he tells this story, but you have a different account. You have a different version.
I listened to Toby say that, and my recollection was it was our other inside. So Pat was an inside linebacker, fullback. Our other inside linebacker, CJ Tracy, I'm 99% sure is the one who threw the shoe from the pile to the sideline. That week, for any nostalgic football guys from the 90s, the movie The Program had came out, which to this day is still probably my favorite movie of all time. It is not well acted, well directed, well anything, but at that time, there was nothing cooler than that movie that was so non-real. But to us high school kids, you're like, we need to be more like that, because they're just talking trash and doing weird things. I remember that whole game, people were like saying things based off of that movie. And so I think the motivation for chucking the shoe there came from that movie. It didn't happen in the movie, but I think just odd thing, like there was more trash talk in that game than probably all the others I played in high school combined, because I think everybody saw the movie the weekend before and thought it was so cool. And so I am, like I said, I won't categorically say he's wrong, but I really believe it was CJ Tracy who threw that shoe to the sideline. I remember because he was pretty proud of doing it on the bus ride on the way home afterwards. Yeah.
I mean, you came in pretty quick there with a name. So I feel like, sometimes that first instinct, I think the memory clicked in there. All right. Well, like you said, I won't dispute it, because Toby was pretty adamant too, but that either way, that is an all-time story. That is
Toby took a lot of hits that game, so his memory may not be as good as some of the others there.
Yeah. All right. So you end up at Augustana College playing football, and then you knew you wanted to be teacher, head coach somewhere. Talk me through kind of, what you were looking for, and you end up at Alwood. And is it just, apply for a bunch of jobs and see where you end up?
Yeah. So, came out of Augustana. My first job was at Northwestern La Harpe as an assistant. And it was really a cool job down there. I didn't really know the school, but I knew Northwestern La Harpe was really good. They'd just been in the state championship game a year or two before that. And the job was very unique because I found it in the newspaper, believe it or not. Yep. But it was assistant football, assistant basketball, math, PE, and athletic director. And so I called the principal at the time, who was Jeff Miller, who just came from being at Monmouth, being the athletic director. And I said, do you have to have another degree for this AD thing? So I'm like looking at this job thinking, this is everything I've ever wanted to do, because basketball was my second favorite sport. I had a math and a PE major. And he's like, well, not necessarily. I'm like, why don't you come down? So we talked about it. So I took that job, and I've been an AD my last year at Alwood, and then these last 8 years here at MR. I'm pretty sure I don't know what I was doing as the AD that year. I don't even remember if I even did the job, but someone must have helped me out. So I had a really good experience there, really good team. Coach Lafferty, Hall of Fame coach, still talk to this day, still coaches to this day. He was a great mentor there for me, and I really wanted to be a head coach. So the Alwood job opened up. I applied, went and interviewed. They didn't have any teaching openings. And I said, well, I can do math or PE. And so about a month passes, and I get a call from Steve Lemon, the athletic director, and said, hey, I think we got a job for you. And so Scott Petrie, who had been a math teacher there, been a football coach before that, a couple coaches before that, was moving into administration and kind of creating a job for him, working him towards becoming the high school principal soon enough. And so he had kind of a little bit of a hodgepodge, a little bit of PE, a little bit of math, a little bit of junior high, and they could get me a full-time position there. And so what I always tell people is, I think I might have been one of the only people that would have taken the Alwood High School head coaching job at that time. And they were definitely the only school in the state that would hire a 23-year-old who had 1 year of coaching experience at the time. And my high school coach, Coach McCarty, I remember told me, he's like, if you take this job, no matter what happens year one, you are going to be so much further ahead at the end of that year than if you're an assistant for 4 or 5 more years. Like, you'll be more prepared, but because you'll have to do it, the paperwork, the preparation, the organization, like the first year. And because he'd done the same thing. He became a head coach like at 23, 24, and then things took off for him a few years later. And so I kind of took that advice, and Alwood was a school growing up in Aledo. It wasn't very far away from me. And so Joe Blimboom, one of my other high school teammates, had just taken over to Lexus the year before and had a ton of success year one. And so I kind of felt like I knew the conference. And so I took that job there at Alwood and was there from 2000 through the fall of 2005.
Yeah. So, looking at the resume here from Alwood. Now, also, are you the last ever head coach of the Alwood Aces football team?
Yes. Yeah. So I had 5 years as the Alwood Aces head coach. First year, we did go 0-9. So
I was just going to get into
exactly
that.
what Coach McCarty said I could do. I think we led in the homecoming game on Saturday. We led for like a minute and a half. My mom did get a picture of the scoreboard of us leading because I had that in a frame for a while. So went 0-9, and then my second year lost the first 2 games again, and then went on a little bit of a run after that. We ended up winning 3 games and actually weren't terribly far away from having a crack at the playoffs that year. My second year, and then my third, fourth, and fifth year, we made the playoffs each of those seasons. But that 5th year, we knew going into it, this was the last year of Alwood Aces football. And we only had 29 total players. 27 of them, though, were sophomores through seniors. So it really wasn't, varsity-wise in the LTC, it wasn't bad at all. We couldn't do any JV games. But I remember about that group was we weren't terribly talented. We'd been in the playoffs the last couple of years, and in very much large part because of that senior class, but they were always like supporting pieces, linemen, and nobody really was a star on that team. And I remember that year, I actually kind of looked around at a few jobs and interviewed at a few places, and then eventually made the decision that, nope, I'm staying. Like, I think this is a group, I have so much respect. They were like 7th graders when I got there, or 8th graders, I think. And I just thought, we could go 3-6 or 4-5 this year and not make the playoffs, and I might still be satisfied because these kids will give me everything they've got, and they just had always done that. Because the first year we made the playoffs, we only had 10 juniors and seniors, so we had underclassmen playing all over the place, and they were a big part of that group. And that team literally went to the last game, week 9, and we were playing Stark County, who was 7-1. We were 4-4, needed a win to get in at home. It got delayed Friday night into Saturday, and we ended up shutting out Stark County week 9 to make the playoffs with that group. And so it was really cool to finish up Alwood Aces football, 3 consecutive playoff appearances when Alwood had never been to the playoffs ever before that. And so that was a really rewarding year there. And yeah, it was a little different, but they knew the deal going in. It wasn't a surprise, like this is going to be the last year, and then we're going to be co-oping with Rova the following year.
Yeah. Take me back to what was that buzz like when you're, that first year, 2002, when you're eyeing a playoff spot and Alwood had never been there. I mean, that had to be cool as a head coach to know, like, man, I did something that's never been done. And I'm sure you at the time were talking to parents and grandparents about what it meant to them to see this program do it. What do you remember about that?
It was awesome. I mean, honestly, looking back, it makes you like, I don't know if I appreciated all of it then, because I think I was a young guy trying to act like an old guy in certain situations. But yeah, the community was very supportive. I think initially just that I came in and definitely really, really cared. And we had weightlifting and off season and mornings, and I was got into coaching track there. I helped out during basketball season, just like being around the kids. And we just had an amazing group of younger kids there and older kids. The parents were incredibly supportive during that time. And yeah, the 2002 year, I thought we could have made it the year before, which probably would have been pretty amazing looking back after, but in the middle of it, we thought we could do it. Yeah. The next year, I really thought we could, but again, we only had 10 juniors and seniors, and honestly, only 7 of those, I think, were starters. We were starting like 4 sophomores on the offensive line. We had a freshman fullback who was amazing, but like he was 14 years old. And that year, we lost the game early, week 2, to Rova, and should have won the game. And in my mind, I'm like, that might be the one, like looking down the road there. And it was just kind of a crazy deal. And then we got going throughout the season, and we got to week 8 at home against Princeville. We were 4-3, but we needed this one because we had Stark County waiting for us week 9. And at that time, they were really Stark County.
Yeah.
So we knew that, and that was going to be on the road. And we're playing Princeville, a team we probably should beat. I think they had 2 or 3 wins coming in, and back and forth game at home. Everybody's very excited. It seemed like a massive crowd. I don't really know what was there. But late in that game, my first All-State player I ever had, Alex Willett, was our fullback linebacker and their heart and soul of our team. Was a senior that year, and we're driving, and he fumbles the ball, and we lose the ball, and they've got it. And there's, 2 minutes left. It's bad,
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my, this can't be how it goes down, and 2 plays later, they fumble it back to us with like a minute 30 to go. Maybe we're at the 25, 30-yard line down on their end. And Alex runs over to me. He's fine linebacker, runs over to me. And I think he had a few extra words in there, but he's like, give me the ball every time. So we did. And I think it was the second play. He busted 21-yard touchdown. We're going to the playoffs. And I remember it was so exciting for those kids and for the community and for everybody. We had a pep assembly the next week, and it was such a big deal. You get the playoff patch, you get to put the patch up on the banner, those hanging the old, the felt banners used to hang from gyms. And it was just really, really cool. And then that kind of became, so then the following years, like they wanted that and then some, and so every year it was doing it again. And but that was a really, really special year because, like I said, there was a couple of opportunities there where maybe it would have slipped away from us. And if it does, who knows what happens after that. But yeah, that's a night I'll never forget. That's an all-timer for sure.
Yeah. You mentioned your mom taking the picture of the scoreboard when you, in the losing season. Was she there when you win? I'm sure.
Yeah, my parents are all the games, honestly, just about all of them, which is awesome. So yeah,
they're the best.
I think back to them, like they were young then. I was really young, but like it was just, and they became like kind of part of, they were friends. That's still really good friends with a lot of the parents of that team because they weren't a ton older. Like I wasn't a lot older than the kids I was coaching, and they were all over that stuff. And wearing the Aledo Green, and there's still a massive tote at my house. And randomly I go and take shirts out of it because you end up with all this extra stuff when you're a coach. And I still have like primo condition 2002 Aledo playoff gear, that I go and I'll grab one because it fits. And like school, and they're from Breedlove's back in the day, one of your sponsors, right?
Oh, I love it. I love that.
Those shirts, I'm telling you, the shirts they made in the early 2000s, you can't replace those. There's something different about the Russell brand, all that since then. But they still have all of that stuff and very supportive back then. And it was very, very cool.
I still know, going back to the Rockridge days too, I still know exactly where, if I'm shooting video at Monmouth Roseville, I know exactly where to go to find your mom and dad sitting down there under the scoreboard. I always say hi. Your mom, your parents are both so nice. They always ask how my family's doing, how everything's going. So it's great. That's always one of the things I look forward to. The people you meet over the years, that's almost more fun than covering the games. You're going to see certain people at certain spots. So anyway,
absolutely.
What was the transition like going into Elwood Rova? Because you had success the 1 year there under that co-op as well.
Yep. Yeah, that was a great experience. Of course, I got into coaching a co-op my first year, which I think was really helpful. And it was tough because Elwood, we were kind of the upstart, and Rova had a much better history than we had and had missed the playoffs for a couple of years as we'd been making the playoffs. I think maybe our first year in was their last year they'd been in. So there'd been a couple of year separation there. And there was a mix of the coaches. We had 2 coaches from the Rova School District. There was 3 from Elwood, and we got together and gelled really well. And it was kind of a really weird situation because I felt like the seniors were like cordial to each other, but they were still rivals, The juniors were much tighter because I think they saw this is 2 years. This is my varsity time. Like these are going to be my teammates, and the younger ones the same way. So we really never had too many issues amongst like the kids. There's always animosity between different factions. You get the people that are used to being rivals back then. And, but it was really an awesome experience, an awesome year. We were, essentially a 3A program all of a sudden instead of 1A, like we both had been.
Yeah.
And we're still playing in the LTC, and we played Cambridge first game of the year, who went on to get second in the state. And I think we had the ball like 40 out of 48 minutes, like no exaggeration that night, and lost 13-12. Like they had 2 drives and they moved the ball and they scored right before half, right for the end of the game and beat us. But, we knew Cambridge was really good. So we still felt, and we should have won, but felt pretty good about our group. We played Tuscola that year down in Eastern Illinois, lost to them in the last 2 minutes of the game. And they were a team that would go on to play, I think the semifinals that year in state champs. The next year had been like Coach Winky's son was quarterback, and like they were pretty good. And then we lost the game to Princeville on the road later on week 7. So we went 6-3 in a 1A conference as a 3A playoff team. And so we ended up going to the playoffs, and we played Petersburg Porta first round. They were the conference champions of the Prairie Land, beat them on the road. Then we played Sherrard at home, which again, as far as all-timers go, it's in that top 5 consideration as well.
Yep.
Sherrard was 10-0, probably a team that felt like potentially could play after Thanksgiving. Olympic Conference champions, and we ended up beating them at home as well. So we started off our playoff run beating 2 other true 3A teams who were conference champs of the other local conferences, and we were a 6-3 team that fought to get in the playoffs from a 1A conference. And that night at Bill Adams Field there at Rova was absolutely insane. Like the stories of the lead up to that game, the game itself, the immediate lunacy of after the game, we scored on the last play of the game. Just pandemonium on the field. That's a DVD I still have. For sure. Yep. And that whole week is just unbelievable. And then we ended up losing to Bureau Valley the next week. Garrett Barnes and Bureau Valley beats us by 1 score at home the next week, and they go on and win the semifinal by 30 and win the state championship by 20. And I said it proved to me that year that you don't have to be the best team to win a state championship.
Yep.
But I think we were 1 score, 1 stop away from Bureau Valley from probably doing that with a team that couldn't beat 3 1A teams during the regular season. We got hot. We had great kids. The camaraderie was awesome between those 2 groups. And it was a really, really fun year that was a springboard to give me the opportunity to get the job at Rock Ridge, which I kind of always wanted to get back in the Olympic if I could. And there was a couple of jobs that I thought could have been open, and Rock Ridge was the first one that was, and was able to get hired after that season.
Yeah, I'll ask you about that in a minute, but I think it's interesting that you bring up, it's not always the most talented team that's going to go all the way through and march all the way through, because things happen during a regular season. Things happen during the playoffs. Do you think, getting way back to you referencing, like, maybe you weren't the best athlete growing up coming into high school, but you worked at it. Do you think that you as a head coach have been influenced by maybe your background, and that maybe you do get some more out of kids that some other coaches, some other, guys might look at and say, he doesn't fit the part. He doesn't play this role. But I don't know. Do you think you see things a little differently, being that, you weren't coming in, you said it yourself, maybe not the top, guy coming into high school?
Yeah, I think so, without a doubt. I've always kind of, you kind of gravitate towards what you are. And I think actually a lot of coaches probably are more like me, because the ones that were really, really good, for the most part, it's tough for them to relate to people who aren't good.
Yeah.
Because I was someone who, at least the way that I see myself, as someone who worked really hard to get where he was and got to play at Augustana because I worked really hard, not because I was super talented, but also played with guys that were crazy talented, that were way better than I was in high school and college, for sure. And so you kind of gravitate towards those kids that want to put in the time and the effort. And I think as a coach, you have to, at smaller schools, which is all I've ever coached at, and when you have 50 kids or less in your program, you got to find that kid who maybe isn't even one of your best 11 players, but there's something they can do really well. And if you let them just do that all throughout the year, one side of the ball, they eventually become a really good player. And that A&R year, for example, I think our 2 starting defensive tackles, one was a 3rd string fullback and one was our backup quarterback. And they started at defensive tackle for us. And we said, just go give us 2 plays. And then we bring in the 2 guys that started on the offensive line, and they come in for 2 plays. And we just rotated them back and forth. And so in 22 positions, I think we had like 15, 16 starters. And so over the course of the season, like some of those kids that probably wouldn't have been a starter at the start of the year, with your best 11 on each side, they just got so much better. And then they practiced against other starters. And I think we just continued to get better. And the other thing that I think always meant a lot to me was, Coach Breeden was our pump up guy. That was our pregame speech guy, and he could get you to want to do absolutely anything at any time. And I don't think I'm anything like that, but something I've always tried to do is find motivation for our kids, and either pump them up too much, maybe when they're down, and then maybe, look at more of the threatening version when they're too up and trying to find a way to get the best out of them during those times. And I know I've had some people say, like, you say things to kids or about other teams that no one else will say and like admit it. And I'm like, well, sometimes I think you got to find those buttons to push sometimes and find that motivation. And I was always very motivated by the things people did. Because like I said, I wasn't a hitter growing up. I wasn't a tough guy. I'd like to think I became reasonable at it as I got bigger and stronger and played more. But I think a lot of it was like the coach just made you want to go out there and do something that maybe you wouldn't do on your own.
Yeah, no, I always say, like, some of the best head coaches, like, you'll want to run through a brick wall, right? You hear what they got to say and they're behind you. I've been in your locker room for pregame speeches. They're good. You're good. So,
well, I always figure, like, sometimes you go out there and you play really well, and then sometimes you get all fired up and go out and you lose by 24. It didn't really carry over much after that. But yeah, I just think, I think it's important, number one, but also I think as I've gotten older, there's been times where I've walked in and been the exact opposite. Like, you thought I was going to tear the walls off, and instead, like, no, this is what it is. And if we're really going to be the team that we think we're going to be, then we're going to figure this thing out. I'm confident you will. Let's go do it. And then usually in those situations, that's when you'll walk out and you'll hear some of your leaders, your more vocal kids, they kind of take over for you. Like, they're going to give the butt chewing before they go out there and get people fired up. And as you know, like, if your kids are leading those types of things, or really anything in athletics, if they're leading anything that you're doing, you're in a much better spot. If kids are just doing it because they think coach wants them to, that's only going to last so long, because every coach wants a kid to work hard, play well, communicate, all those things. When your buddies start doing it, it takes on a little different meaning.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about taking the job at Rock Ridge. You referenced it there quickly. So did Jeff Henry coach 1 year after Rick Amy left, and then you stepped in?
Yes.
Okay. But in either case, I guess my point is that, when you stepped into the Elwood situation, there is very little expectation, right? I mean, it's your first year as a head coach. And I think the community is probably, like you said, excited that you're just putting in the work. You're putting in the effort. On the flip side, you take the job at Rock Ridge, and coming off of what Rick Amy had built, and they had been a state champion, they'd come in as a runner-up not too many years before you take the job. Talk me through kind of what was different, coming from Elwood going into Rock Ridge, and what excited you about it. And take me through kind of what was the differences.
Sure. Yeah, it was, I mean, I was very excited. I was thrilled for the position, and being an Aledo guy going to Rock Ridge, like, there was a lot of my teammates like, what are you doing? Like, but yeah, I'm very excited. I mean, right away, I had a lot of people reaching out to me. I went and watched a regional final basketball game they were in, and multiple people came up to me and just introduced themselves. And I met with, I was meeting with JFL coaches, I think probably in like April of that year, because they were interested, like, what are we going to be running? What are we going to be doing? And it was a totally different setup there. And I knew Coach Henry a little bit. I knew Coach Strahan more. Actually, I was talking to him during a girls' basketball tournament we hosted at Elwood, and told him, like, teach math and PE. He's like, well, we might have that, and Coach Henry had taken over the year before, and Coach Strahan had coached with him, and knew some other people there, and got the job. And again, was really, really excited about it. They were coming off, they'd been 2-7 the year before. With that was when the conference, that was my A&R years. The conference was really good that year with Sherrard and Macomb and Aledo. I think were all like deep playoff teams, and maybe others there as well. Knoxville, I believe, was as well. And Tyson Blazer just graduated, who's like one of the best athletes that ever went through there. So, like, my first year, in my mind, though, I'm like, okay, like, I figured this thing out. I went to a place that never won anything. We got them in the playoffs. We went to the quarterfinals. Now I'm in a job with, a little better facilities, better history for sure, better conference, better competition. And we got right to work there that first year, and we started that season 0-3. We lost to Hall, we lost to Mendota, and then we lost to Orion. And I think we were fairly competitive with Orion, but we were struggling. We were really hurting. And I think we got to play Sherrard maybe the next week, and Coach Kirby had just taken over there. And we ended up pulling off a victory there, and we went on and won 5 of the next 6 and made the playoffs at 5-4. And I remember there was a lot of excitement because obviously had not been in there the year before. 0-3 start, not making people think that it was going to happen. But we played in the conference championship game against Macomb that year, week 8. That was the only loss we had down the end there, and made the playoffs and lost a pretty good sized senior class. Probably no one who would be like a star player, but a lot of really good, tough older kids that kind of led us. And then the next 3 years did not go well at all. Won 1 game. Won 4 games the next year. So 4 games the next year. Then we won 1 game the year after that. And then we won 2 games my final year. Had a JV team that had won 7 games and honestly won 2 games that year. And looking back, probably should have won 4 minimum. Really lost some games that we were probably capable of winning there with a pretty young roster. And, for me, it was really my first experience of like not being successful. Like the first couple of years at Alwood, you felt like you were building something. And then honestly, I don't think anybody thought we'd make the playoffs my first year at Rock Ridge, because I'm not so sure we were probably good enough to. We won the games we had to win that year. So got fired. That's something that every coach is doing. And I got legit fired. Like I didn't resign, stuff like you're going to vote it out, and lost out by 1 vote. I really wanted the job. I wanted to keep the job because I felt like it was getting ready to really turn with the young kids we had coming back. But, that was a tough night personally. But I've always been the type of person, I think this is instilled by my coaches and my parents, that like, okay, like I'm gonna get another one of these jobs, and if possible, I'm gonna get a job in the conference, and like we're gonna be really, really good. Someday, because I still had a high level of belief in myself and what I was willing to do, but it definitely made me change some of the things that I did, or at least maybe I think it's when I matured from now I am getting to be an older guy, and had to find a way to kind of thread the needle a little bit, because I think when I was at Alwood, I still look back, I was really lucky. I mean, I was a maniac, and I was not nice to those kids. Like the best I would usually say, other than after a win, was like, that's not bad. That's okay. Very few like goods other than during a game. And those kids bought in and worked their tails off for a guy that seemed like probably wasn't ever happy with what they were doing. Off the field, great, and was young enough to probably relate to them, but very demanding to the point of like trying to be something that you're not. Took that to Rock Ridge, and then the lack of success probably made me more negative in those last couple of years and didn't help anybody. And then was lucky enough to catch on at Mercer County as an assistant. I was still teaching at Rock Ridge the 5th year, and I was an assistant there. And the thing that was so cool there, I got to coach my positions. I got to coach the heck out of them because I had no paperwork or anything to do. But the cool thing for me was I got to show up on Friday nights knowing we were going to win. Like that year, the Mercer County jersey was going to win 4 or 5 of those games, and we ended up winning, I think, 8 that year. But, it was just such a different, I was years away from even feeling like I had a chance most nights, because we really struggled there at the end at Rock Ridge, and then, kind of got back to, reevaluating some things and kind of had a year to put it in place. Like, when I get to do this again, here's how I'm going to do it. And there were several changes that were made.
Yeah. I think, you kind of spoke to my next question already when I was going to ask, what did you learn in that time at Rock Ridge, and how did you change as a coach? And you kind of addressed it all in there. And I think it's really interesting to know that it's like any athlete, right? Like if you lose, what do you learn from the loss? Like, don't just take it as a loss and that's it. Like, what did you learn from it? And now you get better. So I do find that fascinating that, yeah, there's things that you can take out of an experience that didn't go the way you had envisioned it, and didn't end the way you wanted it to end. So you talk about, wanting to get a job in the conference, and you talked about being motivated to get back in that head coaching role, and in comes Monmouth Roseville. Monmouth Roseville had consolidated not too many years before you took over. And in the course of their time, Monmouth High School had success, and there had been success along the way. I believe they had 1 playoff appearance before you got there. Actually, fun fact, I think their only playoff game was against Newman, but do you know where it was played?
I don't.
They played at Rock Falls. Newman versus Monmouth Roseville played at Rock Falls because Sterling High School was also in town that day.
Sure.
There's a weird tidbit.
There we go.
So anyway, what did you see in that Monmouth Roseville job that excited you? I know you wanted to get back on the sidelines as a head coach. Take me through getting in there.
Yeah, I just the year at Mercer County went really well, and they even had a math job open up, and it was offered to me like, hey, if you want this, like, we'd love to have you stay. And I remember just telling the head coach at the time and the principal, like, I I could take this. It was like around Christmas. So like, I could do this, but to be honest, I'm going to be trying to get a head coaching job for the next 5 months. So I don't want to take a job that I'm going to leave in 2 months, whatever it is. And so, yeah, so I saw that Kurt Crum was the coach before me at Monmouth Roseville, and they'd went 0-9 the year before. And he had resigned not too long after the season. And I just read the newspaper. And so I reached out to Coach Chuck Grant, who was the athletic director and head basketball coach, who I'd known over, not well, but just knew of him, and he knew of me, and just said, hey, I'd be really interested in this job, when you post it. And he's like, well, nothing right away. We'll kind of see what happens. And so reached out again, maybe a little after Christmas at some point. And he's like, yeah, I think the only opening we're going to have is math. And I'm like, well, that's what I do. Like, I'm a math teacher. He had no idea. And he's like, oh, well, that's great. Like, so send your stuff in. And so I sent it in and went and interviewed with the math department chair, Mindy Youngquist, who actually just retired this year. She actually brought out I brought like a little portfolio in there with me, and she still had it from 2011.
Yeah.
And she was cleaning things out. She gave it back to me. And but anyway, I went and interviewed there with Coach Grant and Jeff Bryan, the principal at the time, for the math job separately from the football job, and was offered that position, was really, really excited about it. Again, they were coming off a tough year, but I think their JV team had won 6 or 7 games the year before. I had a couple kids by the name of Martell Hunter and Trayvon Smith that were freshmen that year. They were going to be sophomores. And Drew Cole was their senior quarterback, who had been a starter for a couple of years. And so I remember, even coaching against him back when I was at Rock Ridge, and was just really excited about the opportunity because of the success. Actually, one of my assistants from A&R, Chad Willis, was living in Monmouth at that time. And so, just a lot of connections there. And so I was really excited about that job, and went there and hit the ground running right away. And again, had pretty lofty expectations for year one. We went 4-5 that first year, but then the next year we were able to get in the playoffs and won a playoff game and had a little bit of success there. And again, it was just kind of it felt a little bit like Alwood. I think my first summer workout there, we might have had 19 kids show up total. Yeah. But the other coaches were like, well, this is great, because there was like 7 last year. So I was like, okay. So we, just getting kids to come to the morning workouts and get used to what we're going to do in the off season and all those things. And it was good. It's amazing to think that was 2011. That was 14 years ago.
Yeah. Was the playoff win was over St. Bede, right, at home?
Yeah, it was a great eating. That team, we went on a heck of a run that year, because we were actually 1-2 to start the year, and would finish the year 8-3, won 7 games in a row. We actually played. It was the last year we were going to play Orion, because all those teams were going to leave the conference. And so we played a road game against Orion at Monmouth College week 3. Chip Filler, who had played for Steve Bell and Chad Braun at McMurray, always wanted to play a game at the college. And so he's like, it's our last chance. Like, we're not even going to play each other after this. Like, we're the home team, but we're going to play at Monmouth College. So we played there. We lost. Great game. We lost, fell to 1-2. And I remember our seniors, I didn't know this at the time, so much so that we actually had a bus still that was going to take us back to Sunny Lane. We found out we left some kids behind. Like, we thought everybody was getting in with their parents and going. There's like no kids on the bus. They had the seniors had a meeting down in that locker room at Monmouth College and said, like, this isn't happening. This is not how this is going to end up. And we won 7 games in a row. Wow. Beat St. Joe Ogden that year, who was undefeated. Beat Illini West, who was a top 10 team. Beat Rock Ridge that year to qualify for the playoffs, and then beat St. Bede at home round 1. It was like 48-22. Like, really got on them pretty good. And it was we played a Saturday night game. I'm always a big fan of the later Saturday games. Massive crowd for what we had normally seen there. And had just a fantastic night with that group. Then lost to Sterling Newman actually the next week at Sterling High's turf field in a really hard fought game when Sterling Newman was really, really good that year in the second round.
I'm also always a fan of those Saturday late afternoon, because I was able to start that Saturday at Anawan Weathersfield, and then I drove to Monmouth and caught your playoff game later in the afternoon. So that was a great day. That was one of those old-timer.
The media usually likes that, because they can get some extra games in there. And I just remember when I was younger hearing about Wilmington always played at night on Saturday night, because they do this cool entrance through the trees and the smoke, and it's not the same effect if it's during the day. And I was like, that's kind of cool. I never even thought about Saturday, because we always played Saturday at 1 at Aledo. That's when it is. It's Saturday at 1 every week. And So we did that. Actually, the A&R year, when we beat Sherrard, we had the home game. We had that game in the evenings, all part of our plan leading up to that night, because you'll get a lot of people showing up just because it's the only game around.
Yep.
And there are people like yourself that like, there's a game an hour away, I'll drive to that one. So a lot of them are leaving a game to go to a game. And so you get like a bigger crowd because there's so many people that show up that really aren't attached to either team. So yeah, it makes a cool atmosphere. I love playing under the lights. I really have gotten to the point where I despise the afternoon games, regular season or playoff. It's just and that's what I grew up. Some of my most fond memories were those games. But now as a coach, I really I like it when the lights are on or at least have to come on at some point during the night.
There you go. So you make the playoffs in 2012. There's some lean years in there, and then you're back in the playoffs in 18. And now 21, 22, 23, 24, you've rolled off a playoff stretch here. I remember when you took the job, or early in your time at Monmouth Roseville, you always said that you wanted to build a program that, like on name recognition, that was a team that people were going to look twice at. You used to reference Newman back when you'd say, something about that. And you also mentioned that year, you said, Mercer County won 3 or 4 games because they showed up and they were Mercer County, because people are intimidated. So looking on kind of your resume here at Monmouth Roseville, are you getting there? Do you feel like you've turned a corner a little bit?
I think so. I think, in 12, we really thought we'd keep rolling the next year. In 18, we really thought we'd keep rolling the next year. And both years ended up a game short of making the playoffs with some different injuries and things that kind of hurt us at those times. But then this run since the COVID season has been really good. We had our first workout today, and we had 45 football players there working out at either 6:30 or 7 o'clock in the morning. And that's with at least 5 that I know are already on a vacation or on a planned absence this week. So really 50 kids accounted for out of 55, we think might show up. So just a difference from, having the teens there my first year. But yeah, we've had some really good kids, tremendously supportive parent group, really my entire time, but it's kind of been taken to a new level the last few years. And, I think we're getting closer to being that program. The meetings that we have in this, I always write things up on the board for them. And, last year we had a lot of things we wanted to check off, and we checked off dang near all of them. And this year I just put up the same list and I put the check marks that we had. And a lot of them was like, again, question mark. Because as I told them, programs do it year after year after year. Teams do it one time. And so we have specifically our senior class, several of those kids were starters as sophomores. So they were really a part of, 2 in a row, a playoff victory 2 years ago, the 8 regular season wins and conference championship last year. So yeah, I think we're, this is a good testing point for us, because to go to the playoffs 5 years in a row, to try to win a conference championship 2 years in a row, when you got teams like Princeton and Kewanee, you got to get through to do it. Yeah, I think we're getting to that point. The excitement is always around our program. The support has always been great. So yeah, I think this is a great test for us to see, was it a great team in 2024, or was that the start of what could become a really great program? And I know what our seniors and our juniors believe, like they want this to be a really great program that continues on forever. And and we've got the kids to do it this year for sure.
Yep. Well, we've talked about some playoff wins, but I do want to ask you, before I let you go, I do want to ask you about last year. I felt like another one of those games that pushes you kind of over that top to be one of those programs is a win over a program like Princeton. And I go into this conversation, this story, and I think it's the story is so interesting because of the amount of respect that I'm sure you put on Princeton and that we've put on Princeton because of what they've become and because of what Coach Pearson does out there. Talk me through, you had not been passing the ball hardly at all going into this year. And then in the game against Princeton, you had 2 passing touchdowns, I believe, in the first quarter.
Yep.
So I texted you after the game and I said, tell me this was like a long-term, like big plan here. So take me through kind of the cat and mouse game of what did you know? What did you think going in that, we got to catch them flat-footed. We got to try to do something, because I'm sure, like I said, there's so much respect that you have for what they do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just kind of the way things fell the first week. It was just kind of a weird game against Mercer County. We actually trailed at halftime. We had attempted one pass, but we were hit as we were going to throw it into being fumbled. So it wasn't an attempt. And then we kind of got rolling second half, and there was never a reason to throw it. And then we beat Orion the next week, and same thing, like never really a reason to throw it. I think we called a pass play on a 2-point conversion, and our quarterback just ran it in on a sprint out or a bootleg. And then the Q1 game, we actually needed to throw it a couple times because we trailed in that game, and we had two really good looks and just didn't complete either one of them. And so the next week we had Mendota coming in, and we kind of been looking at things we had been doing. And, coaches aren't supposed to say this, but we were prepping for Princeton a week early. There was enough similarity between what Mendota did and what Princeton did, at least formationally, that we felt like if there are things that we want to install, this is a great week to do it, to get it in their minds, even if we're not necessarily going to use it. And then we found a couple of formations and motions we'd used, and we really had only ran two things out of it. So we thought, well, let's build out of this. Let's build two passes out of it and maybe another run play, but let's just run the heck out of this look as many times as we can. And so we did. And so I think we'd figured out that we had this specific look offensively that we'd ran 34 times in games in weeks 1 through 4. It included 0 passes, and 29 of those 34, we ran the exact same play off of it. So we had 2 passes that were built off of that play, but faking that play. That's 29 out of 34. And so going into that week, we came out first 2 plays. We tried to run the ball. We got nothing out of it. And then we called one of those plays. And we hit a pass for a completion. And Ethan Clark, our tight end, turns up the sideline, turns it like a 38-yard first down for us. And then a couple plays later, I think on a second down, we call a different play there, and we get a touchdown. Our kids execute it perfectly, and we get a touchdown there. And then the next time we get the ball after we stop them, we go right back to that same look. But now it was the other pass play off of that, and hit them for a touchdown, and then really never threw the ball again. Well, I had one completion in the second half that we had to keep a drive alive, but it was one of those things like I think it got them on their heels. Our kids got tremendous confidence out of it, and then we ran the ball and kind of dominated the game. But I think, having that little bit of element of surprise, because if I was playing us, like, make them throw it. Like, make them throw. They've tried 2 passes this year, and neither one was completed, and either one of them could have been. They just weren't. And, I've been one of those guys before as a coach, like, let's make them do something they don't do to beat us. If they do that, they're probably better than us. If you take away what we think they're trying to do and they could, find something else to beat you, then that's kind of your job as the coach. So, yeah, it was kind of the long con, I guess, leading up to that one there. But it was more the kids' because you can call those things.
Yeah.
You overthrow a guy, or you drop a pass, or you don't protect, and you're in trouble. And that's what we kind of always built the kids on, and it's became even more of a joke this year. In the spring, our kids get together and throw the ball in the gym every Friday morning for 30 minutes. And a couple of our guys said, well, can't we just do like stock blocking and handoffs when we go in? Because we're not going to. Well, if we don't catch it now, you may never catch it again. But it's just it was an awesome night. I mean, again, I've said a few times now, but we're up to about 5. It's 5 all-timers, games I'll never forget. And a big part of that was the kids' execution on something that we thought would work, but had no proof of it leading up to that point.
Yeah, I think it's a fun story. My only thing is you threw the ball too early, because I was still driving from my first game to get to Monmouth. So I missed the big passing play highlights, but I did manage to get your huddle film, and I did throw those into our YouTube video. I had to.
Absolutely.
So anyway.
Yeah, I remember you talked about, like, you thought you'd get there around the second quarter, and I didn't. And I usually go behind the scenes. So I usually send you some joking texts about our games coming up or other games or whatever.
Yeah.
And I literally typed out and just didn't send it. I literally typed out, like, we'll probably be up like 20-0 by then. Like, that was going to be my, like, just snap response, And looking back, I'm like, man, if I had the guts to pull that off, it was 14-0 when you got there. Like, but yeah, no, it was, quite a night, quite a start. And then really just like I said, that night, 31-3 wasn't in my wildest dreams that night. And it's still a big push for us. Actually, the last thing I left our kids with in our meeting before the summer was I put up on the board, 31-3 question mark, or 20-22 question mark, which 20-22, of course, is the playoff loss. Like, when you wake up in the summer, which one of these two felt better? Which one do you want to strive for? You want to strive for that 31-3 night or that 20-22 afternoon? That was pretty heartbreaking.
Yeah. Well, Coach, thanks a lot. I know you got a busy day, so I'll let you go, but I really appreciate you. I hope I didn't make you late for whatever's next. But
my daughter's finishing up basketball camp. She's a kindergartner at a K-8 basketball camp, so she'll be excited for me to pick her up, probably get the donut or something afterwards.
All right, sounds good. Well, hey, Coach, we'll touch base again and talk more about the season coming up, but I really wanted to sit down and kind of go through your coaching career. I think it's interesting to hear coach's story. So we appreciate the time, and we'll be talking again soon. High school football is not that far away.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Greg.